Hello and welcome back to that 70s card show. I am your host, John Keating, and I thank you for joining me as I take a look back at the cards and the culture of the very colorful 1970s. We'll revisit a more simple time in our hobby by taking a deep dive into the sets and the stats with a generous amount of dad facts sprinkled in. That 70s card show is currently sponsored by nobody. If you have a comment or suggestion, I urge you to drop me a line at ThatSeventiesCardShow@gmail.com. Um, you can reach me at 70s Card on Twitter or throw a comment in the comment section on the YouTube. That's YOUTUBE. This is episode 32 of that 70s Card Show. 32, I think of Steve Carlton. It's also the year my father was born. So 32 means a little bit something to me. And to celebrate the number 32, we're going to not talk about cards. We're going to talk about the baseball stadiums of the 1970s. Now, there's many stadiums from the 70s. Some survive, some don't. Some were good ideas, some not so good. So I'm going to knock out probably maybe 6 at a time here, if time allows for us to do that. I've chosen a completely random order, which is alphabetical, starting in the National League. And before anybody says anything to anyone, the Houston Astros are a National League team, and the Milwaukee Brewers are an American League team. That won't change in my mind. I don't care what baseball says. So research comes by way of Baseball Almanac or Baseball-Almanac. I believe it's a .com, and the Wikipedias, and of course the Google image fun. So that's that. If you're watching on YouTube, you get to look at a couple stadium pictures. If not, then you get to hear me describe as best I can all about the baseball stadiums of the 1970s. So we are going to start off with those Atlanta Braves. And Atlanta Braves, people my age grew up with Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, referred to as Fulton County Stadium, and originally named Atlanta Stadium. And it was a multi-purpose stadium in the southeastern United States. Most of us know that. Located in Atlanta. All of us know that. Stadium home was home of the Atlanta Braves of the Major League Baseball and the Atlanta Falcons of the National Football League. It was built to attract an MLB team in 1966 and succeeded when the Milwaukee Braves relocated from Wisconsin. The Braves and the expansion Falcons shared the venue for 26 years until the Falcons moved into the newly completed and even more recently obsolete Georgia Dome in 1992. The Braves continued to play at the stadium for another 5 years, then moved to Turner Field in 1997 following the Olympic Games. City of Atlanta owned the stadium along with Fulton County. They both operated the stadium as well. Capacity for baseball was 52,007 when it closed, and 60,606 humans for football. Field size, 330 down the lines, 385 in the gaps, and 402 to center. That was 66 to 68, 74 to 96. Somewhere in the 70s, they started mucking around and changed the power alleys to 375. And even in 1973, they made it 375. They couldn't decide in 73, so they went with 375 in left center and 385 in right center. So people had no idea what they were doing down there. They were just completely messing with the stadium for random reasons. Known as the launching pad, obviously, for those of us a certain age, a lot of home runs hit there. Natural grass surface. Let's talk a little bit about the construction. April 15th, 1964 is when they broke the ground. Opened in April 9th, 1965. So in less than 1 imperial year, not a metric year, an imperial year, they finished completion of this stadium. It closed October 24th, 1996, again, the same year the Olympics were held in Atlanta, and demolished on August 2nd, 1997. Cost $18 million back yonder, $148 million in 2021 bucks. Still pretty cheap, 184 or 148, but it kind of shows there weren't a lot of features to it. Heary and Heary, FABRAP, FabRap are the architects. Who cares about structural engineers and services engineers, and the general contractor. Tenants were the Atlanta Crackers of the IL, which I assume was a minor league team, and an interesting name for a team from down south. That was 1965. Atlanta Braves from 66 to 96. Atlanta Falcons from 66 to 91. The Atlanta Chiefs from 67 to 69, 71, 72, and 79, 81. They were a North American Soccer League franchise. And the Peach Bowl was held there for what appears to be 22 years, from 1971 to 1992. July 25th, 1972, the stadium hosted the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. Hank Aaron hit a home run during the game, and the National League won it 4-3 in 10 innings. Also, April 8th, 1974, Henry Louis Aaron, the greatest hitter of my lifetime, became baseball's all-time career home run leader by hitting his 715th home run off of the Los Angeles Dodgers' Al Downing. Couple other big things. May 4th, 73, Led Zeppelin played to 49,233 people. It is estimated about 16,000 of them sat on the field. And it made it the largest single musical performance in the history of the state. I'm sure that's been broken since then. Elton John rolled in also in 73, September 73, on the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road tour. ZZ Top played there in 1976 with its worldwide Texas tour. If you haven't seen the ZZ Top documentary, Run, Walk, Trace Embrace Your Buns over to there, it's pretty good watch. I'm not even a ZZ Top fan, but it was very enjoyable. So as if ZZ Top wasn't enough, Marshall Tucker Band and Elvin Bishop were there. Long live Freedom Rock. August 29th, 1976, that same summer, Kiss played there on the Destroyer Tour, along with Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, Johnny and Edgar Winter, both the winners, and Blue Oyster Cult, along with some more Freedom Rock 38 special. Kiss is the reason I do what I do for a living now. I think they're a bit of a joke the last 30, 40 years. But anyway, for 10-year-old me, it was a pretty big deal. Back then, I would have been 8 years old. So the only thing I'd liked more than Kiss back then was baseball and baseball cards. Kiss was a third place, but still very important in my life. Anyway, a couple more things. This stadium was relatively nondescript, one of the many multi-purpose stadiums built during the 60s and 70s, similar to the Vet, RFK Stadium, Astrodome, Three Rivers, Bush Memorial, Oakland Alameda, and Riverfront in Cincinnati, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. As was the case for every stadium that used this design concept, the fundamentally different sizes and shapes of baseball and football fields made it inadequate for both sports. In the baseball configuration, 70% of the seats were in foul territory. In the football configuration, seats on the 50-yard line, normally prime seats for football, were more than 50 yards away from the sidelines. One unusual feature of the stadium is the fact that, unlike most multi-purpose stadiums, where the football field was either laid parallel to one of the foul lines or running from home plate to center field, the football field here was laid along the line, a line running between first and third base. So it kind of went cross field there. Oakland Coliseum has a similar configuration. Thus, a seat behind home plate for baseball would also be on the 50-yard line. Check out this next paragraph. Unlike similarly designed outdoor stadiums such as Riverfront and Bush Memorial, Fulton County Stadium always had a natural grass surface. However, for many years, it was notorious for its poor field conditions. Until 1989, it didn't have a full-time groundskeepers. Instead, it was tended by the municipal street maintenance crew. So imagine the same huckleberries that kind of short arm the potholes around the neighborhoods, right? All that junk. You rather put a traffic cone up around something than actually fill in the hole. These were the same guys that were tending to the grass in the field at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. Pretty impressive use of government employees, if I do say so. And finally, due to the elevation of the Atlanta area, situated in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, the stadium boasted the highest elevation in baseball when it opened, at 1,050 feet above sea level. It retained this distinction for 27 years until the expansion Colorado Rockies entered the National League in 1993. The highest elevation and southern summer heat made it favorable to home run hitters, resulting in the name the launching pad. Until the Florida Marlins arrived also in 1993, the stadium was the hottest in the majors. Again, this bad boy was finally demolished on August 2nd, 1997. I guess between Hank Aaron and Dale Murphy, there was quite a run of really good players playing out of the limelight in that stadium. Phil Niekro, too, I guess, another Hall of Famer. So there's that. We are going to venture next to Wrigley Field. Now, Wrigley Field obviously is still there, and Wrigley Field has a couple other distinctions that you may or may not know about. I popped up a couple pictures of Wrigley Field on the YouTube stream. Nice shot into center field, or from center field into the home plate. See the stands, the signs, all that crap. Also, there's a 1989, I believe, scorecard for Wrigley Field commemorating the first night game, which we'll talk about in a second. So there's some cards attached to these stadiums where I could find them. Where I dug them up, I done throwing them all on the YouTube feed. So Wrigley Field is located on the north side of Chicago. Obviously, it is the home of the Chicago Cubs and one of the city's two Major League Baseball franchises. It first opened in 1914 as Weigman Park for Charles Weigman's Chicago Whales of the Federal League, which folded after the 1915 baseball season. Cubs played their first home game at the park on April 20th, 1916, and defeated the Cincinnati Reds 7-6 in 11 innings. So we know it as the home of the Cubs since 1916, but ballpark was in play for 2 years before that as a federal league. And if you want to learn about the federal league, go watch that there Baseball by Ken Burns documentary. You'll learn a little bit about that. Chewing gum magnate William Wrigley Jr. of the Wrigley Company acquired the Cubs in 1921. It was named Cubs Park from 20 to 26 before being renamed Wrigley Field in 1927. It is actually the second stadium in the name to be named Wrigley Field, as Los Angeles Ballpark with the same name opened in 1925. Wrigley Field's current seating capacity apparently is 41,649. Yeah, so the record attendance was 47,171, and that was a game in 48 against the Brooklyn Dodgers. Left field, 355. Your power alley and left, 368. Dead center, 400 feet. 368 also to your right field center area-ish. Right field, 353 feet. A little shorter than your left field. Your backstop is 60 feet, 6 inches from home plate, which is the same distance to the pitching mound. Pretty darn cool. Outfield wall is 11 feet, 6 inches, and in the corners, it is 15 feet. They broke ground on that stadium on March 4th, 1911, and it opened April 23rd, 1914. It took them, looks like, 2 years longer to build that than it did to build Atlanta County, Fulton County, something down there stadium. Renovated in 37-88, 2014 through 2019, expanded in 22, 27, and 2006. Initial cost was $250,000, which is $6.46 million in today's monies. Pretty darn cheap, right? Architect was Zachary Taylor Davis, and The tenants included the Chicago Whales of the Federal League, 1914 to 15, the Chicago Cubs, 1916 to present, the Chicago Tigers, 1920, which is the APFA. I imagine that's a football entity. The Hammond Pros from 20 to 26, an NFL team. The Chicago Bears from 21 to 1970, also one of those NFL teams. I think they're still active. Chicago Cardinals, 1931 to 1939, also NFL. And the Chicago Sting of that North American Soccer League, 77 to 82 and 1984. This was designated a Chicago landmark on February 1st, 2004, and a U.S. National Historical Landmark, September 23rd, 2020. So, north side community area of Lakeview in the Wrigleyville neighborhood. So that's pretty, a lot of layers deep there. The Wrigleyville section of the Lakeview section of the north side of Chicago. Wrigley Field is on an irregular block bounded by Clark and Addison streets to the west and south, and Waveland and Sheffield avenues to the north and east. Wrigley Field is nicknamed the Friendly Confines, a phrase popularized by Mr. Cub, Hall of Fame shortstop and first baseman Ernie Banks. It's the oldest park in the National League and the second oldest in the majors after Heaven on Earth, Fenway Park. And it is the only remaining Federal League park, which is a fun fact that you might win your next bar trivia contest. Wrigley Field is known for its ivy-covered brick outfield wall, the unusual wind patterns off Lake Michigan, the iconic red marquee over the main entrance, the hand-turned scoreboard. Its location primarily in a residential neighborhood with no parking lots and views from the rooftops behind the outfield, and for being the last major league park to have lights installed for night games in 1988. Between 1921 and 1970, as I said, it was also home to the Chicago Bears and the Cardinals, which went to St. Louis, which went to Arizona also. And the elevation of its playing field is 600 feet above sea level. So let's talk about the construction here a little bit. Baseball executive Charles Wiegman hired his architect, Zachary Taylor Davis, to design the park, which was ready for baseball by the home opener on April 23rd, 1914. The original tenants, the Chicago Whales, also called the Chi-Feds, came in second in the Federal League rankings in 1914, and they won the league championship in 1915. However, in late 1915, the Federal League folded. The resourceful Wiegman formed a syndicate, including the chewing gum manufacturer William Wrigley Jr., to buy the Chicago Cubs from Charles P. Taft for $500,000. Wiegman immediately moved the Cubs from the dilapidated West Side grounds to his 2-year-old park. In 1918, Wrigley acquired the controlling interest in the club. In November 26, again, he renamed it Wrigley Field. 27, an upper deck was added. And in 37, Bill Veeck, the son of the club president, planted ivy vines against the outfield wall after having seen ivy painted at Perry Stadium in Indianapolis. So following a later change in Major League Baseball rules, which required all outfield walls to be padded, Wrigley Field was grandfathered into the rules, meaning it is the only stadium in the league without padded walls because of the ivy. Let's talk about that hand-turned scoreboard. The scoreboard was installed in 1937. Bill Veeck installed that when he installed the new bleachers in center. It has remained in place ever since and has only seen minor technical and cosmetic modifications. The clock was added in 1941. And a fifth row of scores was added to each side in 1961, with a sixth by 1969. That's expansion, I guess, made that happen, right? A set of light stands facing the scoreboard was added in 1988 with the introduction of night games. So scoreboard facing lights, so you can actually see the scoreboard at night. And speaking of lights, the Cubs obviously were the holdout against night games for decades, not installing lights at Wrigley until 1988, after baseball officials announced that the park would be prohibited from hosting any future postseason games without lights. Money talks. Before then, all games at Wrigley were played during the day. Night games are still limited in an agreement with the city council. 1942, then owner Philip K. Wrigley had planned to install lights, but were scrapped due to the World War II effort. On July 1st, 1943, the All-American Professional Baseball League's first mid-season All-Star game was played under temporary lights at Wrigley Field between two teams composed of South Bend Blue Sox and Rockford Peaches players versus Kenosha Comets and Racine Bells players. It was also the first night game ever played in the park. So the men, as usual, about 40 years behind the women in evolution as well as playing under the lights at Wrigley. In the late 1980s, Cubs management insisted that the team was in danger of leaving Wrigley if lights were not installed, and Major League Baseball threatened to make the Cubs play postseason home games at Busch Stadium in St. Louis. After 5,687 consecutive day games played by the Cubs at Wrigley Field, the lights were finally lit on 8/8/1988 for a game against the Philadelphia Phillies. However, that game was rained out after 3.5 innings, and the first official night game took place the following evening against the New York Mets, whom the Cubs beat 6-4. Again, Chicago Whales were the first tenant from 1914 to 15, and Cubs have been there since 1916. A couple highlights. 1970, we talk about the 70s here. May 12th, 1970, Ernie Banks hit his 500th career home run against Pat Jarvis of the Atlanta Braves. December 13th, 1970, the Chicago Bears held their final game at Wrigley Field, beating their rival Green Bay Packers 35-17. Now, they used to have to hand-build stands, I believe, out there in right field to make it look kind of like a football stadium and obviously take them down. I don't know if they did that on a schedule basis, like they would do 2 home games, 2 road games, or whether they would just alternate it every other week or what. It sounded crazy. But I guess since the Cubs were never in any danger of playing in the postseason, wasn't that big of a deal. April 16th, 1972, Bert Hooton pitched a no-hitter 4-0 win over the Phillies. This was his 4th career start, and he was the first NL rookie in 60 years to throw a no-hitter. The season had started late due to a player strike, and this one came on the second day of the season. September 2nd, 1972, same year, same team, Milt Pappas pitched a no-hitter 8-0 win over the San Diego Padres. He came within 1 strike of a perfect game, but walked a batter. The pitch called as a ball was highly controversial. Milt Pappas and many Cubs fans alike believe the pitch was a strike, not a ball. Pappas, after this, retired the final batter. Imagine that, going 8 1/3 or 8 2/3 inning, and then you walk a guy on a controversial call, third strike. Tell me umpires aren't biased. After a relative rash of Wrigley and Cubs no-hitters, this was the last by a Cub until Carlos Zambrano did so against the Astros. Ironically, this game was held in Milwaukee due to Hurricane Ike. So I don't know if there's been a no-hitter in Wrigley since 1972, but it says here Carlos Zambrano did it against the Astros, but in Milwaukee. Pretty wild. 1976. Okay, here we go. Let's go. April 14, 1976, Dave Kingman of the New York Mets hit what more than 40 years after the fact would remain one of the 3 or 4 longest documented home runs in Wrigley Field's history, another of which, a near carbon copy of his blast, launched on May 17th, 1979. Also the handiwork of Kong. This home run ball carried far beyond Waveland Avenue. The ball traveled more than 520 feet before striking a window pane several houses in on Kenmore Avenue. All right, Kong. April 17th, 1976, with a strong prevailing southerly breeze, the Cubs took a 13-2 lead over the Phillies through 4 innings, only to finally lose 18-16 in 10 innings as the Phillies tied the NL record for the largest lead overcome. Tied at 15-15, the Phillies scored 3 in the 10th, partly on the strength of Mike Schmidt's 4th home run of the game, and the Cubs were only able to come back within 1 in their half of the 10th. This allowed the Phillies to tie, again, the National League record for largest deficit overcome, which was 11 runs. 1977, on July 28th, the Cubs and Cincinnati Reds tied a National League record for most home runs in a single game with 11. The Cubs beat the Reds 16-15 in 13 innings. Man, all these slugfests in extra innings. And then, not to be outdone, on May 17th, 1979, a game I remember very well, another wind-blown game with the Phillies. The Phillies took a large lead, only to have the Cubs catch them in the late innings. However, like 1976, Mike Schmidt did the Cubs in again, hitting a home run in the 10th, his second of the day, off of Bruce Sutter, to give the Phillies a 23-22 win. Dave Kingman hit 3 home runs that day in a losing cause. So in a curious mix of nostalgia and masochism, the following winter, WGN will replay the entire game videotape as a snow day special. Oh, to be a fan at Wrigley, huh? Something special. So next we're going to move on to Cincinnati. All right. So the Cincinnati is our first entry into this thing with 2 stadiums in the 70s. So first we're going to head over to Crosley Field. And Crosley Field was a Major League Baseball park in Cincinnati, obviously. It was the home field of the National League's Cincinnati Reds from 1912 through June 24th, 1970, and the original Cincinnati Bengals football team, members of the second and third American Football Leagues, but however, not the home of the current NFL franchise, Cincinnati Bengals. They played from 68 to 69 in nearby Nippert Stadium, located on the campus of University of Cincinnati. Crosley Field was an asymmetrical block surrounded by Finley Street, Western Avenue, Dalton Avenue, York Street, and McLean Avenue, west of the Queensgate section of the city. If you're looking at YouTube, it looks like a big old dirt field out behind center field, but definitely an old-timey ballpark. Crosley has the distinction of being the first Major League park with lights for playing night games. The Finley and Western intersection was the home field of the Reds from 1884 until mid-1970, when the team moved to Riverfront Stadium. The location of the diamond and consequently the main grandstand seating area was shifted several times during the 86 and a half seasons that the Reds played at the sites. 3 different parks stood there. League Park originally till 1901, the Palace of the Fans till 1911, and Redland Field, which was named Crosley Field in 1934, from 1912 to 1970. I want to say current Crosley Field, but Crosley Field of the past, they broke ground in 1911, finished by opening day 1912, closed June 24th, 1970, and it was demolished April 19th, 1972, built for $225,000, which is $6.03 million in 2020. Harry Hake, remember him? Neither do I. He was the architect of that there, John. Tenants were the Reds from 1912 to 1970, the Reds of the NFL from 33 to 34, the Bengals of the old AFL 37 and 41 through 43, the Tigers of the NAL 1937, the Buckeyes of the NAL 1942, and the Cincinnati Clowns 1943 to 1945. NAL, not sure what that is. Somebody educate me, please. Capacity was kind of minimal there. 20,696 when it opened, and when it closed, it was 29,488. I imagine that a lot of that was the right field bleachers that they added back on there. Left field fence, you were 360 feet from home plate. Left center 380, dead center 420, right center 383, and right field 360. The backstop was 38 feet from home plate. There was some minor, I shouldn't say that at all. There were some major alterations in 1958. So left field went from 360 to 328 feet. Looks like they may have built a parking lot out there, paved over, built a parking lot, as they say. And right field actually extended out to 366 feet, an additional 6 feet. And the backstop, the backstop was this is where your math comes in. This is where math is very hard for me. Anyway, the backstop went from 38 feet in 1957 to 78 feet in 1958. So they pushed everything back out there 40 feet and redid everything. So this was a grass surface, obviously, since it was back in the golden days of baseball. Uh, it was believed that the Sunday, September 28th, 1969 game against the Houston Astros, which was that year's last home game for the Reds, would be the final game ever at Wrigley Field. However, delays in final construction of Riverfront Stadium led to the Reds opening the 1970 season at Findlay and Western against the Montreal Expos. New additions to the Reds that season were figures who would become Reds legends: George Lee Sparky Anderson and shortstop Dave Concepcion, who had actually been signed by the Reds as an amateur free agent in 1967 as a pitcher. So in 1970, the Reds were pennant bound, but Wrigley Field did not figure into that event, as we would find out in this next paragraph. The Reds' last game at Wrigley Field was played on June 24th, 1970, against the San Francisco Giants. With the Reds trailing Juan Marichal and the Giants 4-3 in the eighth inning, catcher Johnny Bench tied the game on a solo home run. The next batter, first baseman Lee May, won it on a solo shot of his own. Pretty impressive there, guys. Way to come back. The ninth inning was a relatively easy one for the Reds reliever Wayne Granger. Bobby Bonds grounded out the first. Jim McLaughlin, the starting pitcher for the Reds in their last game at Wrigley Field, was also the starting pitcher for the team's first game at Riverfront Stadium. One of the highlights of the closing festivities was Mayor Eugene P. Ruhlman taking home plate out of the ground and taking it via helicopter, and which he would land on the field to Riverfront Stadium and installing it in the artificial turf. After a brief road trip to Houston, which saw them sweep the Astros, they returned to Cincinnati and opened Riverfront Stadium against the Atlanta Braves. They lost 8-2. Crosley was the first of three Jewel Box era National League parks to close in 1970. Forbes Field, home of the Pirates since 1909, closed 4 days later, and the Pirates moved into Three River Stadium 2 days after Riverfront hosted the All-Star Game. Philadelphia's Connie Mack Stadium, which hosted the Athletics from 1909 through 1954, and the Phillies since 1938, closed at the end of the season also. Very sad time for the old-time ballparks. So we are going to move across town and go to Riverfront Stadium. It was known as Synergy Field from 1996 to 2002. It was a multi-purpose stadium in Cincinnati. It was home of the Reds from 70 through 2002 and the Cincinnati Bengals from 70 to 1999. Located on the Ohio River in downtown Cincinnati, the stadium was best known as the home of the Big Red Machine, as the Reds were often called in 1970s. Where are we here? We've gone to Fulton County. We've gone to Chicago. I've been to Wrigley Field, and I was at Riverfront Stadium, too. I got to see them play the Giants back in the day, late 90s, I want to say. The San Francisco Giants. Right there on the river, Riverfront Coliseum is or was right next to it. That's where we talked about the Who Stampede last week, I believe, 1979. Dad Facts. Had the opportunity to play with various bands, the Riverfront Coliseum, many times. That thing, I'm telling you, these stadiums and arenas were right on the river. It was amazing. You couldn't see the river from inside, though. Construction began on February 1st, 1968, and was completed at a cost of less than $50 million. Riverfront's grand opening was held on June 30th, 1970. An 8-2 loss again against the Braves. Braves right fielder Hank Aaron hit the first home run in Riverfront history, a 2-run shot in the first inning, which also served as the stadium's first runs batted in. 2 weeks later, on July 14th, 1970, Riverfront hosted the 1970 Major League All-Star Game. The game is best remembered for the often replayed collision at home plate between Red Star Pete Rose and the newly departed Ray Fosse of the Cleveland Indians. Left field was 330 feet from home plate, left center 375, 404 to dead center, and your right field center area was 375 feet, and right field was 330 feet, 51 feet from the backstop to home plate. Baseball, pretty much most of its lifespan was 52,952 peoples. That's 53,000 if you're up, rounding up. Incidentally, 2001, 2002, the capacity dropped to 39,000. They essentially cut the center field bleachers. I guess whatever that is, 30% of the stadium, they leveled in order to make room for their current ballpark, which I believe is Great America, something. The field, the dimensions were affected slightly too. I think everything was moved in. The fences moved in about 5 feet. Maybe center was moved in 10-ish, 11-ish feet, and the backstop was moved further back, 41 feet backstop to the home plate. AstroTurf 8 from 1970 to 2000, and they put grass in for the last 2 years, which is pretty phenomenal. Again, broke ground on February 1st, 1968. I was 9 days old. Opened June 30th, 1970. Closed September 22nd, 2002. Demolished December 29th, 2002. Heary and Heary and Fab Rap again were your architects. Those guys get around. Yeah, that's about it. Talk about a couple other firsts here. Yeah. So Riverfront was often confused by the name because another banks of the Ohio River Stadium, Three Rivers Stadium. I know as a kid I used to confuse them a lot as well. So Three Rivers and Riverfront were often used interchangeably by kids like me and sportscasters because of the similarity. But it was Riverfront Stadium. And original site sat the 2nd Street tenement, which was the birthplace and boyhood home of the Cowboys singer and actor Roy Rogers, who often joked that he was born somewhere between second base and center field. Great sense of humor there, Roy. Love your chicken at Roy Rogers restaurants. First stadium to have its entire field covered by AstroTurf, except for the cutouts around the bases and pitchers' mounts. Used to call them sliding boxes back in the day when AstroTurf ran rapid. I guess up to that point, some of the artificial stadiums, turf stadiums like the Astrodome, had AstroTurf and the normal infield cutouts, but these were full-blown sliding box cutouts, as we call it. First hit was Felix Millan, June 30th, 1970. Of course, Hank Aaron with that home run in June 30th, 1970, same game. First upper deck home run was from Tony Perez, August 11th, 1970. First World Series game ever played on artificial turf, October 10th, 1970, was the Reds versus the Baltimore Orioles. First no-hitter was Ken Holtzman, June 3rd, 1971. First pitcher ever to pitch a no-hitter and hit 2 home runs in the same game, Rick Wise of the Philadelphia Phillies, June 23rd, 1971. Hank Aaron ties the all-time home run record with home run number 714 on April 4th, 1974. And this was the first stadium to display metric distances on the outfield walls, 100.58 meters down the lines, 114.30 to the alleys, and 123.13 to center. This was 1976, and we were all going to metricize. We never did. Highest season attendance was 2,629,708 in 1976. 1976, I often say, is the greatest offensive team ever in baseball, the Cincinnati Reds. Don't at me about the 1927 Yankees until the Yankees have led the league in every offensive category except stolen bases. Then you can at me. The first rain checks were issued for a game on August 30th, 1978. Some of the concerts that played there, 76, we had August 4th, Jethro Tull. That was the Too Old to Rock and Roll tour. And later on that month, August 16th, 1978, the Eagles performed with Eddie Money and the Steve Miller Band on the Hotel California tour. 51,855 people's packed the stadium for that. Don't ever tell me there was a better decade for music than the 1970s. You had your Eagles, you had your Fleetwood Mac, you had your Pink Floyd, you had your Led Zeppelin. It's a non-starter with me. And not to be outdone, the Jehovah's Witnesses hosted 3 conventions at the stadium from 71 to 74 and 1978. Pretty risky endeavor having a outdoor convention like that. Nobody cares if the rock and rollers get wet. They probably could use a bath, but for a religious convention, that's pretty risky in the summer out there in Appalachia, upper Appalachia, I should say. So we are moving on to Houston, again, nationally, Houston Astros and the Astrodome. It was known as the Houston Astro Dome or simply the Astrodome, the world's first multi-purpose domed sports stadium, and obviously located in Houston, Texas. It was financed and assisted in development by Roy Hofheinz, mayor of Houston, and known for pioneering modern stadiums. Construction on the stadium began in 1962, and it officially opened in 1965. It served as the home of the Houston Astros from its opening until 1999, and the home of the Houston Oilers of the National Football League from 1968 until 1996. And also the part-time home of the Houston Rockets of the National Basketball Association from 1971 until 1975. Additionally, the Astrodome was the primary venue of the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo from 1966 until 2002. It's a pretty big deal down there, folks. If y'all get down that way, the rodeo is a big deal. When opened, it was named the Harris County Domed Stadium and was nicknamed the eighth wonder of the world. After the original natural grass playing field surface died, the Astrodome became the first major league sports venue to install artificial turf, which became known as AstroTurf. In another technological first, the Astrodome featured the Astro-Light, which was the first animated scoreboard. The Astrodome was renovated in 1988, expanding seating and altering many of the original features. That Astro-Light scoreboard was pretty wild. It was animated. For those of you who have as many have grown as many rings as I have, as we get older, you'll remember that the little ricochet hoochie macoochies bouncing up and down on the scoreboard out there. That wasn't normal back then, folks. It was scoreboards were pretty damn simple. Let's see here. That address, in case you want to send them mail, is 8400 Kirby Drive. Again, known as the Houston County Dome Stadium in 65, the Astrodome from 65 to 2000, the Reliant Astrodome from 2000 to 2014. Owned by Harris County and operated by Astrodome USA. Record attendance was 69,925 brothers for WrestleMania 17, I guess. Left field was 340 feet, left center 375, center field 406, right center 375, right field 340, backstop 60.5. Oh, God, one more inch and there would have been symmetry between the backstop and the pitcher's mound, but that didn't happen. They shrunk the dang thing a little bit there later on. I guess, it was known as a pitcher's park for sure. So they brought the fences in 15 feet on the lines and about 6 feet dead center. Grass 1965, painted dirt in 1965, and AstroTurf from 1966 yonder. Opened April 9th, 1965, $35 million, which is $287 million in today's dollars. The architects were Herman Lloyd, W.B. Morgan, Wilson, Morris, Crane, and Anderson, Prager, Kavanaugh, Waterbury. That's confusing. So the tenants were the Astros again for most of that term, 65 through 99. The Houston Cougars, NCAA basketball team, 65 to 97. Think about those Houston Cougars, though. Those Houston Cougars had themselves Hakeem Olajuwon and some Clyde Drexler, and they were a pretty good team back in the early 80s. The Livestock Show, again, 66 through 2002. The Houston Stars of that NASL, North American Soccer League, from 67 to 68. The Oilers from 68 to 96. The Blue Bonnet Bowl from 68 to 84 and 1987. The Rockets, again, temporarily or just passing through from 71 to 75. The Texans of the World Football League, 1974. The Hurricanes of that NASL, again, 78 to 80. The Gamblers from the USFL, 1984-85. The Houston Bowl from 2000-2001. And the Houston Energy, which was I want to say, Women's Professional Football League. Anyway, WPFL from 2002 to 2006. This is a National Register historical place and a Texas State Antiquities landmark. It's still there. I went there once in 1997 or 98. I was visiting my in-laws. My son was a infant, less than a year old, would not sleep. But a surefire way to get him to sleep was to drive him around. So about 3 in the morning, I drove down to the Astro Dome and circled around the parking lot for a while. My son was there, but he was asleep by then. So that's my only visit to the Astro Dome, but love the place. Very iconic. So the Astro Dome was designed by the people we said it was designed, and structurally engineered by the people I said it was. Let's see here. It stands 18 stories tall, covering 9.5 acres. The dome is 710 feet in diameter, and the ceiling is 208 feet above the playing surface. So those 18 stories I just transposed into 208 feet in one sentence. The surface stands 25 feet below the street level, by the way. The air conditioning system was designed by I.A. Nauman. Other aspects that were considered included visibility, which could be reduced by cigarette smoke, light admittance, and acoustics, requiring approximately half the roof to be covered with sound-absorbing materials. The air handling units were designed to move 2.5 million cubic feet a minute of air, with approximately 10% of that being fresh air from outside to limit carbon dioxide buildup. So instead of recirculating the air, they'd pump about 10% of that air in. Yeah, those glass tiles were painted up there. And again, you need to add acoustical elements, or it's just going to sound like everybody's in the bathroom at the same time trying to talk. Too much echo. Scoreboard, again known as Astro Dome, was designed by Fair Play Scoreboards of Des Moines, Iowa. Having designed the scoreboard for Dodger Stadium several years prior, team owner Roy Hoffheinz was not impressed with the initial proposal for a much more generic type of scoreboard. Project designer Jack Foster teamed up with a creative professional based in Kansas City to create the first animated scoreboard. This scoreboard cost $2.1 million. Dome was completed in November 1964, 6 months ahead of schedule. Many engineering changes were required during construction, including the modest flattening of the supposed hemispherical roof to cope with environmentally induced structural deformation, and the use of a new paving process called lime stabilization to cope with changes in the chemistry of the soil. Gosh, I don't know what any of that means. Multi-purpose stadium designed to facilitate both baseball and football. It's nearly circular and uses movable lower seating areas. It also ushered in the era of fully domed stadiums we'd see later on. Obviously, the Superdome, Pontiac Silverdome, Georgia Dome, the Hubert Humphrey Dome, King Dome, and RCA Dome, all gone as well. So to test what effect the enclosed air conditioning environment might have on the delivery of breaking balls, Satchel Paige, in full Astros uniform, threw the first pitches at the Astrodome on February 7th, 1965. He later concluded that it was a pitcher's paradise, as the lack of wind allowed for sensitive pitches to maneuver more easily. Hoffheinz, the owner, also had an opulent apartment in the dome, which was removed when the facility was remodeled in 1988. That is so Texas, isn't it? Astrodome suffered a rainout on June 15th, 1976. The Astros' scheduled game against the Pittsburgh Pirates was called when massive flooding in the Houston area prevented all but a few fans from reaching the stadium. Both teams had arrived early for practice, but the umpires were several hours late. At 5 p.m. that day, with only a handful of fans on hand and already several hours behind, the umpires and teams agreed to call off the game. Tables were brought onto the field, and the teams ate dinner together. That's so cute. Although the Astros still had a home series with Pittsburgh in August, the game was made up in Pittsburgh in July. The first home run in the Astrodome was hit by, many of you know this, Mickey Charles Mantle, off of pitcher Turk Farrell on April 9th, 1965, an exhibition game between the Astros and the Yankees. First official home run was hit by potential future Hall of Famer Dick Allen of the Phillies in a game on April 12th of that year, a 2-0 Astros loss. And many of us remember the Astrodome as the setting for the filming of an exhibition game with the fictional Houston Toros in the 1977 movie, The Bad News Bears in Breaking Training. I think Bob Watson was in that, if I'm not mistaken. All right, the playing surface was originally Tifway 419 Bermuda grass, bred for indoor use, but the dome ceiling contained thousands of semi-transparent lucite panes. They weren't even glass, they were lucite, which is plastic, folks. Players soon complained that the glare from the panes made it hard for them to track fly balls. To solve the problem, 2 sections of the panes were painted white in April. Unfortunately, within a few months, the grass died from lack of sunlight. For most of the 1965 season, the Astros played on green painted dirt and dead grass. Even before then, the grass tended to hold, then release moisture. The resulting condensation often forced games to be delayed while the grounds crew cleaned up the playing surface. The solution was to install a new type of artificial grass on the field, chemgrass, which became known as AstroTurf, named after the stadium. Because the supply of AstroTurf was limited, only a small amount was available at the start of the 1966 season. There was not enough for the entire outfield, so the first phase covered only the traditional grass portion of the infield and foul territory at a cost of $2 per square foot. Beat that, lumber liquidators. It was installed in time to test out during the exhibition games against the Dodgers in March. The outfield remained painted dirt until after the All-Star game. The Astros completed a 7-game homestand on Wednesday, July 6th, then went on a road trip on both sides of the All-Star break. The installation of the outfield portion of the AstroTurf was completed for a 3-day game series with the Phillies starting Tuesday, July 19th, and covered the entire field. Did anybody get the impression that the Phillies were kind of everywhere? I don't know what happened there. They were just everywhere. Groundskeepers dressed as astronauts to keep this turf clean with vacuum cleaners between innings. The infield design and the same large dirt arc and running paths as a traditional natural grass field. So remember, we talked about the sliding boxes in Cincinnati's Riverfront. These were still using the traditional setup, even with the AstroTurf. So in 1973, the Astros went to that all AstroTurf infield, except for the dirt patches around the bases. The sliding pit configuration was introduced by Cincinnati. Dang, I just said that. With the opening of Riverfront Stadium. It was then installed in the new stadiums in Philadelphia in 71 and Kansas City in 73. The artificial turf fields of Pittsburgh, St. Louis, San Francisco, all installed in 1970, were traditionally configured like the Astrodome and later changed to sliding pits. San Francisco in 71, Pittsburgh in 73, San Luis in 78. The Rogers Center in Toronto was the last park in the majors to have sliding pits. It opened in 89 and switched to the traditional dirt skin field in 2016. Throughout its history, the Astrodome was known as a pitcher's park. The power alleys were never shorter than 370 feet from home plate. On at least 2 occasions, they were as far as 390 feet. Over time, it gave up fewer home runs than any park in the National League. The Astrodome's reputation as a pitcher park continued even into the mid-1990s when the fences were moved in closer than the Metrodome, which had long been reckoned as a hitter's park. Capacity when it opened, 4,217. The heyday of the 70s, it hovered between 44,500 and 45,100 attendees. So that's your Astrodome. Imagine the pitchers there, right? Joe Niekro and Larry Durker and Nolan Ryan and James Rodney, Richard and Don Wilson. Definitely a pitcher's park for sure, right? Later on, too, they had some decent pitchers. We're getting there, folks. We're going to move on to another ballpark that is still in play, and that is the Dodger Stadium. Dodger Stadium is a baseball park in the Elysian Park neighborhood of Los Angeles, California. It is the home stadium of Major League Baseball's Los Angeles Dodgers. Opened in 1962, it was constructed in less than 3 years at a cost of $23 million, which equals $197 million in today's monies. It is the oldest park in Major League Baseball west of the Mississippi River and the third oldest after Fenway and Wrigley. It is the world's largest baseball stadium by seat capacity. Often referred to as a pitcher's park, the stadium has seen 13 no-hitters, 2 of which were perfect games. Sandy Koufax, Don Drysdale, Fernando, Don Sutton, all those guys, they pitched there, and they pitched there very well. And it's interesting that it's the largest baseball stadium. That couldn't be said 20, 30 years ago when all these other stadiums were rocking along, these places like Veteran Stadium and such. Stadium hosted the Major League Baseball All-Star Game in 1980 and will host again next year in 2022, as well as games of 10 World Series, 63, 65, 66, 74, 77, 78, 81, 88, 2017, and 2018. It also hosted the semifinals and finals of the 2009 and 2017 World Baseball Classics, and as well as exhibition baseball during the 1984 Summer Olympics. It will host baseball and softball during the 2028 Olympics. The stadium hosted a soccer tournament on August 3rd, 2013, featuring 4 clubs: the hometown Los Angeles Galaxy, Europe's Real Madrid, Everton, and Juventus. And the Los Angeles Kings and Anaheim Ducks played a regular season game in 2014 as part of the NFL Stadium Series. It says the last World Series was 2018. I'm sure they played a couple since then, right? Were they not involved in 2020? Something like that. I think that they had to put 2020 in there as well. Dodger Stadium was the first Major League stadium since the initial construction of original Yankee Stadium to be built using 100% private financing, and a last until Oracle Park in San Francisco opened in 2000. That's one of my pet peeves, how much money these owners of any sport are given to build stadiums. They should be funding them themselves. Ground was broken for Dodger Stadium on September 17th, 1959. Remember, they played at the Coliseum after moving from Brooklyn. The tops of local ridges were removed, and the soil was used to fill in sulfur and cemetery ravines to provide a level surface for a parking lot in the stadium. A local elementary school was simply buried rather than demolished and sits beneath the parking lot northwest of third base. A total of 8 million cubic yards of earth were moved in the process of building the stadium. A total of 21,000 precast concrete units, some weighing as much as 32 tons, were fabricated on site and lowered into place with a specially built crane to form the stadium's structural framework. The stadium was originally designed to be expandable to 85,000 seats by expanding the upper decks over the outfield pavilions. The Dodgers have never pursued such a project. Dodger Stadium was also the home of the Los Angeles Angels from 1962 through 1965. To avoid constantly referring to their landlords, the Angels called the park Chavez Ravine Stadium, after the geographic feature in which the stadium sits. Dodger Stadium was one of the last baseball-only facilities to be built and drawn before the dawn of the multi-purpose stadium. It was built near the convergence of several freeways near downtown Los Angeles, with an expansive parking lot surrounding the stadium. With the construction of many new Major League ballparks in recent years, it is now the third oldest park again in use, and again the oldest on the West Coast. Dodger Stadium offered several innovative design features, one of which was covered and screened section of the dugout level seats behind home plate. Dodgers owner Walter O'Malley was inspired to incorporate this feature into the Dodger Stadium design after having seen it at Tokyo's Korakuen Stadium during a Brooklyn Dodgers preseason goodwill tour of Japan in 1956. The original dugout seating was replaced by more conventional box seats in 1999. But apparently this feature has since been replicated at Progressive Field in Cleveland and Angels Stadium of Anaheim. Two of the Dodgers' most distinctive features are the wavy roof atop each outfield pavilion and the top of the 10-story elevator shaft bearing the Dodgers logo rising directly behind home plate at the top of the uppermost level. I didn't know that was what that was for, to tell you the truth. I sure can picture it in my mind. I know what it looks like, but I didn't know that it was a actual elevator shaft. A unique terraced earthworks parking lot was built behind the main stands, allowing ticket holders to park at roughly the level of their seats, minimizing use of ramps once inside. The stadium was also designed to be earthquake resistant, obviously, an important consideration for California, and it has withstood several serious earthquakes. One of the most fascinating things that I've seen at Dodger Stadium was Fleetwood Mac's video Tusk. It was recorded and filmed at the empty stadium in 1979 with the USC Trojan Marching Band. A great song, great music video, and check it out if you can. All right, one final stadium, if you don't mind, or as they call it, stade. We're going to talk a little bit about Montreal and Montreal's impact on the baseball world. No longer with us, but many of us have fond memories of Montreal in the National League. First place we're going to talk about is Jarry Park. Jarry Park was a park, folks. It was a freaking park, and it still is apparently, that they happen to host major league games at from time to time. Formerly a baseball stadium. It was home to the Montreal Expos from 69 to 76. The Expos were Major League Baseball's first Canadian franchise. It served as a temporary home for 8 seasons until the domed Olympic Stadium was finished and made available for the Expos. The ballpark was typically called simply Jarry Park or Parc Jarry, and that's inaccurate since the stadium was built within the larger park. Whatever. Stadium hosted 2 National Football League preseason games in 1969. That would have been August 25th, the Detroit Lions versus the Boston Patriots, and September 11th, the New York Giants versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. So before Jarry Park, Montreal's main baseball stadium was Delamerier Stadium, which was longtime home of the Montreal Royals, which is where Clemente and Jackie Robinson obviously got their start. The Diamond at Jarry Park had simply hosted youth baseball on the field in the park. However, in 1960, the Montreal Royals were dropped by the Los Angeles Dodgers as an affiliate. Looking to improve facilities for a stadium in Montreal, the 3,000-seat Jarry Park was built, formally opening in August 1960. After the Dodgers ended their affiliation with the Royals, potential new owners of the team had an option on the franchise, with the provision that a suitable ballpark is put in place. Unable to negotiate an agreement to play at the aging Delamerier Stadium, the group looked to spacious Jarry Park as an alternate site. The Jarry Park Stadium was built for this reason. However, even after the construction, the Royals franchise relocated to Syracuse, New York in 1960. When the original baseball field was later approved for the Expos, it was renovated to a park approaching major league standards. Unroofed extensions were built from the original stands to the left and right field corners. A large bleacher section was constructed across left field, and a scoreboard was built around the right field fence. This work brought the stadium's capacity to 28,500. That's 28,500, and they're Canadians. And the park was approved as the Expos' temporary home. If you're looking at this park on the YouTube, man, it really was basic. Beyond the right field fence was a pre-existing swimming pool in the city park. Long before splash hits at Oracle Park in San Francisco and PNC Park in Pittsburgh, there were occasional splash hits here. The first and most famous was a 495-foot blast by Willie Stargell on July 23rd, 1969, leading the locals to call the pool Willie's Pool, or as they say in French, La Piscine de Willie. One of those was hit by Willie McCovey during a 6-4 win over the Expos on August 24th, 1969. And guess what they called that? La Piscine de Willie. The idea of the swimming pool itself was later replicated in Chase Field in Phoenix. Folks, this was a municipal pool beyond the right field scoreboard, down the right field line, where people, take their kids to swim in the summertime. This wasn't like, let's rent the John for $7,800 and have a party. This was a real pool. The stadium was rather sparse, given that it was intended to be only a temporary home for the maximum of 4 years. The clubhouses were located along the left field line behind the stands. So that's both clubhouses, left field line. Due to its orientation, games in April and September frequently started with the setting sun shining right in the faces of the first baseman. Eventually, it was decided to delay games until the sun finished setting. It was completely exposed to the elements, which was a particular problem at the beginning and end of the season, given Montreal's long winters. There was a huge gap between the left field bleachers and the third base grandstands, resulting in the second baseman and shortstops getting buffeted by cold winds early and late in the season. The Expos frequently had to postpone early and late season games because there was no protection for the fans. Even allowing for its temporary status, the field conditions were among the worst in the majors. 1970, Jarry Park served as home as the home of both the MLB team, the Expos, and the Class AAA team, which is pretty wild. The Buffalo Bisons played 13 games in Jerry Park that year. September 29, 1971, batting against Milt Pappas of the Chicago Cubs, Ron Hunt was hit by a pitch for the 50th time during the season. The Expos won 6-5 on Hunt's game-winning single in the ninth inning. On May 9th, 1972, Willie Mays plays his final game as a member of the San Francisco Giants. As a pinch hitter, he gets a single in the ninth inning of a 7-1 Giants loss to the Expos. One Major League no-hitter was pitched at Jerry Park, and that was on October 2nd, 1972, in the first game of a doubleheader against the New York Mets. Bill Stoneman pitched the first Major League Baseball no-hitter outside of the United States as Montreal won 7-0. September 9th, 1973, talk about symmetry. A year and a half following his last appearance as a member of the San Francisco Giants, Willie Mays plays the final regular season game of his career as the Mets defeated the Expos 3-0, despite 13 Montreal hits. Willie would play in the playoffs and I believe World Series later that year against the those crazy Oakland A's. September 28th, 1974, Gary Carter hit his first Major League home run against the Phillies. Steve Carlton. Expos win 3-1. In the last baseball games played at Stade Park Jerry, Phillies won both games of a doubleheader, 4-1 and 2-1. The second game shortened to 7 innings due to rain over the Expos. The win in the first game gave the Phils their first National League East Division title. I remember the celebrations of that vividly. So let's see here. City of Montreal owned Jerry Park, 3,000 people in 1960, 28,456, 1969 when it opened. It fluctuated slightly from then. 340 down the left field line, 368 left center, 420 dead center, 368 right center, and 340 down the right field pool line. Backstop was 60 feet from home plate, grass surface. Last game, September 26, 1976. Go Phillies. And also hosted Inter Montreal Football Club of the CPSL in 1983. We are going to move on now to the final stadium. Same team, though. It's the Olympic Stadium there in Montreal, a multi-purpose stadium located in Olympic Park in the Hochelaga Maisonneuve district of the city. Built in the middle of the 1970s as the main venue for the 1976 Olympics, it is nicknamed the Big O, a reference to both its name and to the donut shape of the permanent component of the stadium's roof. It is also disparagingly referred to as the Big OWE in reference to the astronomical construction costs to the city and of the hosting of the 1976 Olympics as a whole. The tower standing next to the stadium, the Montreal Tower, is the tallest inclined tower in the world with an angle elevation of 45 degrees. That also holds the, I think that's where the base of the tower was also where the Olympic swimming events were held, I believe. The owner is the Régie des Installations Olympiques, which is the government of Quebec. Permanent capacity was 56,040. Summer Olympics, it was 73,000. Baseball, 49,757-ish. Soccer, 61,004. Football, 66,308. That's Canadian football, y'all. Concerts, 78,322. Foul lines, 325 down the left field, 330 or 325, depending on the year, to left center or any power alleys. And the center field fluctuated between 400 and 404 feet over the course of its history. Backstop was 62 feet from home plate, or 65 feet from home plate, or 53 feet from home plate, depending on what year. There was grass in there in 1976 and June 2nd of 2010. AstroTurf from 77 to 2001, 2005, 2006. There was DeFargo Astrograss, Field Turf, Team Pro EFRD, Extreme Turf by Act Global. They had everything into there. Opened July 17, 1976. Closed, actually opened for baseball April 15, 1977. 770 million Canadian dollars, which is 1.47 billion Canadian dollars today. Crazy. Roger Talabert was the architect. Tenants were the Expos from 77 to 2004, the Alouettes from 76 to 86, 96 to 97, and part-time from 98 to 2013. Montreal Maniac of that famous Nassau, 81-83, Montreal Machine of the WLAF, 91 to 92, and the CF Montreal, 2012 to present in select games. It's an MLS team. They jog between there and I believe McGill Stadium or University of McGill or something, McGillicuddy, something over there. Anyway, of course, the stadium replaced Jarry Park in 1977 as the home of the National League's Montreal Expos. As a part of the team's franchise grant, a dome stadium was supposed to be in place for the 72 baseball season. However, due to delays in constructing Olympic Stadium until 77, the Expos annually sought and received a waiver to remain at Jarry. As late as January 1977, it was thought the Expos would have to play at least part of the 1977 season at Jarry as well. Olympic Stadium's first baseball game was played on April 15th, 1977, in front of 57,592 French Canadians. The Expos lost 7-2 to the Philadelphia Phillies. However, the Expos had to use a hacksaw to cut open their own locks because the OIB did not have a master key. The OIB was the, I guess, the people who ran that stadium. Olympic Stadium proved to be somewhat problematic for baseball. As in all multi-purpose stadiums, a lower seating tier was set further back in baseball-specific parks to accommodate the football field. However, since the Canadian football fields are longer and wider than American football fields, Olympic Stadium's lower tier was set back even further than comparable seats at American multi-purpose stadiums. The upper deck was one of the highest in the majors. As was the case with most of the multi-purpose counterparts, most of the upper deck seats, particularly those in the outfield, were far too far away to be of any use during the regular season. The Expos were not consulted on the stadium's location, design, or construction, even though they were slated to be its primary tenants. Nonetheless, for most of their tenure, they put considerable effort into making the atmosphere friendlier for baseball. The stadium's playing conditions left much to be desired. For most of the Expos' tenure, the playing surface was an extremely thin AstroTurf carpet, with only equally thin padding between it and the concrete floor. That was a problem in most of these stadiums. Long-term Expos trainer Ron McLean begged for a replacement, but the OIB was unwilling to spend $1 million needed for the new surface. Before the roof finally arrived, the players had to contend with huge patches of ice in early April or late September. Additionally, for most of the Expos' tenure, the padding on the fence was so thin that fielders risked severe injury by going after long fly balls. However, the OIB was also unwilling to replace the padding. OIB sounds like jerks. By the 1990s, several free agents specifically demanded that the Expos be taken out of consideration due to poor playing conditions. So they had a really good team back in the 70s, Gary Carter and Ellis Valentine, Andre Dawson, Warren Cromartie, and then Tim Raines came along, and those guys cut bait and left due to stuff like the conditions in the stadium. All right, another of our antagonists here throughout, Willie Stargell of the Pittsburgh Pirates, hit I guess he's a protagonist, hit the longest home run at Olympic Stadium on May 20th, 1978, driving the ball into the second deck in the right field for an estimated distance of 535 feet. The yellow seat that marked the location where the ball landed was removed from the 300 level. The seat is now preserved at the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. Stargell also hit a notable home run at the Expos' original Montreal, Jarry Park, which we talked about, into the swimming pool. So this guy did the same thing in Philly, too. He jacked one into the 600-700 level up there, that guy. What is with him? Attendance record. The greatest band ever to walk the face of the earth, Pink Floyd, attracted the largest page crowd in Olympic Stadium history, 78,322 really cool people on July 6, 1977. Second largest crowd was 73,898 lesser cool people for Emerson, Lake, and Palmer on August 26, 1977. The largest crowd for an opera performance were on June 16th and 18th, 1988, with 63,000 to watch a production of Aida. Couple more facts and figures. Again, 165 meters or 541 feet. The Olympic Stadium is the world's tallest inclined structure. That inclination was meant to pull and push the umbrella on top of the roof. I'm sure you guys all know about that, but pretty sick design, as the kids say. Anyway, well over its original budget. Stadium ended up costing $770 million to construct. Final cost $1.47 billion we talked about, but that's essentially double of what it was initially budgeted. The roof is only 170 feet 6 inches above the field of play. As a result, a number of pop-ups and long home runs hit the roof over the years, necessitating the painting of orange lines on the roof to separate foul balls from fair balls. So that's pretty cool. That ball landed fair, 170 feet above the ground. And during their years playing at Olympic Stadium, the Expos were one of only 2 teams not to employ the traditional yellow painted foul poles, with the New York Mets being the other. Olympics poles were painted red, while the Mets home, Shea Stadium, and later Citi Field used orange poles. So that's that, folks. I appreciate you guys hearing me out. I know we didn't talk about cards. If you look on your screen there at home, you'll see a card. I think it's a Panini sticker of Olympic Stadium from the outside. A couple cards we got to fit in here for Dodger Stadium. I think the Dodger Stadium one was a Smokey the Bear, issued by the U.S. Forest Service or something in 1971, I believe. I guess that's a rare card, but pretty cool. And then again, we saw one Wrigley Field, which I think is from the Evolution set, 2019 or so. Wrigley Field had one from the 89 score set commemorating the first night game. And again, this Panini sticker from Olympic Stadium. Pretty cool stuff. They're out there, stadium stickers. Some of them showed up on the back of inserts. I know Fleer put stickers out in the early 80s that I think there were some stadiums on and such. So, yeah, that's pretty there's some cards out there if you want to get some of those at the stadiums. More importantly, go visit a stadium before they close. Never been to Olympic or Jerry. Never been inside the Astrodome. Didn't get to go to Crosley. Didn't go to the Atlanta ones, but go to these stadiums before they, especially in Atlanta, they seem to change stadiums every 5 years. So get yourself a stadium visit as soon as you can. And thank yourself for that. Don't worry. Don't thank me. Thank yourself for that, for getting on out there. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for joining me this week in my journey back in time. If you have a comment or suggestion, perhaps you have a set from the 1970s you'd like to hear more about, or are interested in sponsoring That 70s Card Show, please reach out to me at ThatSeventiesCardShow@gmail.com, That 70s Card Show on YouTube, or 70s Card on Twitter. You can put a comment anywhere you want. I won't be offended. So if you're listening at home on the magical world of podcasts, being played out by Mango Safari, the late, great Mango Safari. And as always, enjoy collecting, enjoy your collection. Have a great and safe week, everybody. Thanks for listening.